Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. For those of you who are new here, my name is Tilly, and today I thought I would share my experience with chronic pain. And I also thought I would tell you how I managed it. So my chronic pain experience started in around 2017 when I tore the labrum of my hip. I had an operation to fix this in 2018, and that operation failed, and it led to 3 more surgeries to try and correct the damage that was caused from that first operation. And the consequences from this first surgery were huge. Consequences included things like daily pain, an inability to move, social isolation, and heightened anxiety and depression as a result. I had a few ways of trying to manage my pain, and those included things like anti-inflammatory medications, Panadol, and then also physical activity. But when I say that physical activity was one of my saviors, I don't mean to say that I was living my best active life, because I absolutely wasn't. I was averaging maybe a few hundred steps a day. Like, I went through and found the logs, and you can see how many steps I was actually taking. On good weeks or good days, then my steps would be around 2,000. But if I hit 2,000 steps a day, I would likely need 3 days in bed to recover from that exertion. I would have to be lying flat in bed for the majority of my time. When I knew I would have to work or I would have to coach, I would have to turn down seeing my friends or spending time with Callum because I knew I had to save my good hip time. And it was really rough. And because of this, my exercise routine were certainly not up to the minimum requirements that are set forth by people on the internet, but particularly by governing bodies telling us what a healthful life should look like. But as an exercise scientist, I was well aware of the benefits that could come from exercise if I was only able to get myself to the gym and get myself to be able to do it. And some of these benefits surrounding exercise and chronic pain are things like reduced severity of the pain, improved physical function, and improved psychological outcomes. When we don't exercise, we get things like poor muscle strength, which is associated with depression and anxiety, and it's associated with things like reduced independence and decreased functional mobility. But working on our strength through physical activity can actually elevate our mood. And that elevated mood can continue for up to 6 months through a period of detraining or not working out at all. But I do think the fitness marketing is pretty positive, and I'm sure that all of us, chronic pain or not, are completely aware of the benefits that exercise can have. And if you're not, you can go check out some of my other videos where I explain them in a little bit more detail. We're consistently bombarded with messages like hit your 10,000 steps a day, or move for 10 minutes out of every hour, or get 30 minutes of high intensity activity every day. And when I was living with chronic pain, I could not do any of those things. And I felt shameful, like I wasn't a good person, like I wasn't a good coach. I felt embarrassed, but I physically could not have made any of those goals. And I couldn't motivate myself to move because I was also really scared that any additional movement would contribute to the pain that I already had all of the time. And for a long time, physical activity did cause me a lot of pain because I was trying to do workouts that would help me meet all of those requirements. I would try to do lighter weights and more total work, so like more reps and sets, to try and build up my tolerance and build up my endurance to make it less likely for me to be fatigued and then in more pain. But the opposite result occurred. It led to me having so much more additional pain, and I would have to spend 2 days in bed recovering from my very short exercise session. When I finally decided that I wanted to move for me and that it didn't matter if I met any of those goals set by governing bodies that were not designed for somebody like me in mind or somebody with chronic pain in mind, then I actually started to make some progress. What ended up working for me was choosing one big compound movement. So think of something like a trap bar deadlift or a box squat. And then I would just do that exercise for maybe like 3 sets of 3 reps, as heavy as I could that day. I would literally do 1 exercise per session in the gym. And this meant that the amount of work or the volume was very low, but ultimately this is what felt best for my hip and for my chronic pain. The amount of exercise that I was doing certainly wasn't in line with any of the physical requirements that governing bodies set out, telling us what a healthy life should look like. And that certainly made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And again, I constantly felt like I should be doing more, because every day on Instagram or in the gym, I would see people doing these really long workouts or doing these really long sessions, and I was only there for like 10 minutes. It sounds silly now, looking back on it, but I honestly did feel like a failure. But on the contrary, doing really small bits of work at the intensity that I was able to manage actually caused me to be the strongest I have ever been. The heavy weights and the less reps also didn't cause my body to add any additional pain. And I know that without even doing this this little bit of work, then I probably would have plummeted psychologically into an even scarier place than I already was in. And I know that without lifting or moving, then my strength, my mobility, my self-esteem would have been way lower and or disappeared entirely. And for that, I'm really thankful that I found something that works for me. But I'm also a strength and conditioning coach, so I recognize that I have a baseline knowledge and technical competency that other people might not have in the gym. So what happens if you don't have that? Where the f are you supposed to start? And this brings me to the guidelines that have been set forth in the literature for people with chronic pain, because I want to help you guys try and find something that works, because it sucks so much. And if you're going through this, I'm just hoping that this will provide you with some information. Maybe you can take something that'll help you. So to begin, the fear of falling or hurting yourself can actually be a really common barrier to entry for people with chronic pain who want to start exercising. So the first guideline is to make sure that we have specific safety precautions in place. And this is to reduce the risk of falls and of injuries. So this might look like lifting with safety bars up, lifting with a friend, going with somebody you trust who you know will be able to help you. In that same vein, the second guideline is to ensure that we use proper technique so that we can reduce abnormal or excessive joint loading. And for me, this was a really big one. While I could probably get away with technical errors before my hip injury, I could absolutely not get away with the same technical errors after, because my body was particularly sensitive to movement and I had to ensure that I was really technically sound. The third guideline is to ensure that you move within a range of motion that is comfortable for you. We want to move through a range that does not increase pain, it does not reduce stability, and it doesn't cause a loss of balance. In my case, I couldn't flex my hip, I couldn't overly extend it, and I couldn't internally rotate and or externally rotate without being uncomfortable. I'll show you what that looks like on the floor. So this is literally like as far as my hip would move without pain. And this meant that doing things like a normal back squat or even a body weight squat were completely out of the cards for me. And again, I hate to come back to it, but it really did make me feel like I wasn't good enough. Like, how could I be a coach if I couldn't even do a back squat? So following this guideline, I instead switched to a box squat. And lo and behold, I was able to move a significant amount of weight doing that. Still to this day, I kind of beat myself up about the fact that my body doesn't move in the same way as other people's, but that serves no one. And I'm realizing as I'm saying this, how much shame I've been carrying around all of that. But I think it's time to let it go. And if anything I'm saying kind of resonates with you, then I want you to take a deep breath. We're gonna let it go. That doesn't serve us. We have nothing to be ashamed of. It's so much better to do what you can and work within the realm of your own ability and to get a little bit done than to do nothing at all. Just to hype myself up for a second, I was kicking ass in the gym for somebody who couldn't even walk to get into the gym. My 100 kilo box squat is so much more impressive to me when I think about the context of which it was achieved in. I couldn't walk for more than 50 steps at a time without having a break or sitting down and or needing to rest for like 2 hours. And I still managed to do 100 kilo squats. I'm honestly having realizations as I'm saying this. I'm like, what has being self-conscious served me with? And this brings me to the last guideline on exercise with people with chronic pain, and that is to start low and go slow. And we're doing this so that we can try and minimize any hyperalgesic effect. I think that's how you pronounce that word. It just means that we're starting slowly and we're doing what we can so that we don't trigger any additional pain. Doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, it just matters what you're doing. So for me, when I was dealing with chronic pain, even DOMS, or that delayed onset muscle soreness that you get after you've done a gym session, even that would be enough to put me off of going to exercise or go to the gym, because my body was already in so much pain that the thought of anything additional, even if it was a little bit, would have been abysmal, and that would have set me off. I would be crying because of how much pain I was in just every day. So it really felt like I couldn't risk it to do something else. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, then you're probably able to relate to some of that. But by doing it just a little bit, like even the 10 minutes of lifting that I was doing a couple of times a week, I was able to minimize that muscle soreness that I would experience afterwards. And because it was only a small amount of work, I was able to be more consistent and adhere to that program a little bit better. And that really helped my self-esteem. And since inadequate belief in oneself and fear of that increased pain and post-exertional malaise are really common barriers to entry for people with chronic pain, then I think this was the right approach. And there are some other considerations for exercise with chronic pain, but ultimately no rigid program or guidelines can be set, because it truly is so different for everybody, and everybody's going to experience it differently. Everyone's going to have a different ability to tolerate load or to tolerate exercise. Some people might find water-based activities are more beneficial for their chronic pain. Whereas for me, that really aggravated my hip and I wasn't able to swim or even stand in water without then being in pain for hours afterwards. A couple of papers have suggested that we aim for low to moderate intensity activity 2 to 3 days per week. But as I expressed, high intensity activity is what seemed to work best for me because I wasn't really able to tolerate the long durations. If I did lift light weights like that light intensity and did do shorter sessions, then I likely wouldn't have been putting enough stimulus on my body in order to make adaptations. Other papers say that daily activity is encouraged even if the intensity is low and the duration is short. And I honestly think even psychologically that is probably right. A small amount is better than nothing, always. If you can even get one stretch done a day, that is huge. This review paper even made the point that avoidance of exercise during acute symptom flare-ups is tempting, but it's likely that even sedentary behavior will not mitigate the symptoms. And since sedentary behavior also promotes a loss of strength, a reduced range of motion, and additional physical limitations. And honestly, I relate to this so much. Some days I would have done nothing and my pain would still be a 9 out of 10. So staying still obviously didn't help. And a lot of days I didn't go to exercise, but on some days I did. And once I figured out my heavy weights theory, I realized exercise didn't actually make it any drastically worse than it already was. So sometimes that fear of pain can be holding us back. And once we actually try it, and if we're sensible and we work within our limits, then it won't be as bad as we think it will be. The review also says that the side effects from exercise are typically temporary. And as an exercise scientist, I agree with this statement. But as somebody with chronic pain, I'm fully aware of the fact that even a temporary increase in your pain can be enough to just send you into a spiral of depression. But truly, and I know this won't be the case for everybody, but if you're able to start slow, if you're able to find something that works for you, even if you just tolerate 2 minutes of movement, that is huge, and we can build off that. It's completely okay to start with really basic movements. Even if you're just able to get a few calf raises done when you're sitting down at a chair or sitting down at the dinner table, that is a great starting point. So we want to start slow and we want to progress at an appropriate rate. And this is so that we can increase that adherence and so we can reduce the exacerbation of pain and stiffness. You're not any less worthy of love or respect if you can't move your body in a certain way for whatever reason. What is important is that we know the benefits of exercise, which I've outlined throughout the video today, and so that we can make the decision for ourselves on whether or not it is something that we want to pursue to help us with our pain management. And it's also so that we can protect ourselves from things like future injury, future illness, or worsening of any chronic pain conditions. And we can do this by increasing our strength, our aerobic capacity, our flexibility, our power, all of those biomotor abilities. You deserve to move, and you deserve to receive the benefits you get from moving your body in a healthful way. And that healthful way will look different to everybody. Dealing with chronic pain can really feel like you're at war with your body, and it can feel like your body is letting you down because it should be able to do all of these things. And I understand that, and it is so tough. So to anybody who's still going through this, my hat goes off to you. You guys are friggin' rock stars. And as scary as it is, the literature on exercise is just so overwhelmingly positive. So even if you're able to do a little thing, or do 3 calf raises one day, or just moving your body up and down, holding a water bottle, just doing some shoulder presses, anything you can do will likely lead you in a really positive direction. How do you guys manage your chronic pain? Is there something that you didn't think would work for you but actually did? I'd love to know. You're all champions. Bye guys.